Good afternoon, Chamber members. For those of you I haven't met, I'm Sabrina Binkley, Head of School at Spruce Tree Montessori and your 2020 Chamber Board Chair. I'd like to take a moment to thank our executive sponsors whose logos you saw on the screen before we began today. These members are the backbone of the Fairbanks Chamber's advocacy efforts. The Fairbanks Chamber greatly appreciates their partnership, particularly right now. A full list of our executive partners can be found on our website. I'd like to welcome Brenna online to help us recognize our new and returning members. Brenna?
Thanks, Sabrina. We'd like to thank the following renewing members: the Surgery Center of Fairbanks and China Kiwanis. We really appreciate your support, and if you have any questions about your membership, please feel free to reach out to me. Another note that I'd like to touch on today is a membership minute, just to give you a tip about how you can best utilize your membership and if you have any questions about it. We recommend updating all of your social platforms along with Google, website, Yahoo, and Chamber Master with the Fairbanks Chamber to make sure that the public and your customers are informed about your hours and any changes of policies. If you have any questions about how to update your information on Chamber Master, you can reach out to me at brenna@fairbankschamber.org. Thank you, and back to you, Sabrina.
Thanks so much, Brenna. The Fairbanks Chamber Board of Directors and staff are currently discussing our role in the economic recovery process that lies ahead for all of us. Some might think it's too soon to begin this discussion, but we firmly believe that we will be most successful if we have a solid plan of how employees will return to work once we get that green light. In the meantime, there is still work to be done on the response side to achieve the sustained reduction in new cases within our community that we need to see. As a reminder, the best way to prevent the transmission of this disease is to stay home. If you must go out, I urge you to heed the guidance of the state medical office and local elected officials. Maintain 6 feet of separation from others at all times. Wear a mask. Sanitize your car, your cart, your basket, and upon your return home, sanitize the goods you bring into your home. Practice good hand and face hygiene by washing your hands thoroughly and often, and cover your mouth when you cough or sneeze. And finally, try hard not to touch your face. As I seek to connect with you weekly, even amidst this pandemic, a time when none of us knows what to expect next, I'm feeling comfort by this GML, by my daily participation in our Zoom classrooms at Spruce Tree Montessori, my conversations with friends and family on FaceTime and Zoom, my chamber go-to meetings, and I hope you're all finding comfort in those ways as well. As we learn new ways of working, learning, living, and playing, it's important to see and hear others. I encourage you to share your space when you're meeting virtually. Turn your camera on. Keep it on. This is an opportunity to connect with one another on a deeper level, one that will undoubtedly be more meaningful to all of us in the end. The Chamber's mission is to advocate for a healthy economic environment by building partnerships that promote the greater Fairbanks area as an attractive place for business and community. Right now, building partnerships with local leaders is our primary focus. We have the reins on ensuring that Fairbanks remains an attractive place for business and community. What we're doing now has proven effective in other areas of the nation. There is optimism coming out of New York and other hard-hit communities. We must continue to choose not to do what is easy, but to do what is right. Thank you to our member businesses for figuring out how to work from home and how to navigate these uncharted financial waters. Thank you to our member businesses for striving to ensure the health and safety of your employees. These tough decisions will make us all stronger, smarter, and more resilient. Keep it up, Fairbanks. Our next Board of Directors meeting will be held on Monday, April 27. If you have any questions or comments as to how we can better serve you right now, please do not hesitate to reach out to me or Marissa directly. And with that, I'll invite Marissa to present her President and CEO report. Marissa?
Thank you so much, Sabrina. Good afternoon, Fairbanks. Just a few announcements from the Chamber staff. I just wanted to let everyone know that our Leadership Fairbanks class of 2020 met virtually last Wednesday for an appropriately timed session on leadership in crisis. I'd like to give a special shout out to Shannon and Wilson for sponsoring the April session. Leadership is especially important in times like this, and we're proud to continue growing leaders here in the greater Fairbanks community. Over the past few weeks, I've been learning as much as I can about the Paycheck Protection Program, Economic Injury Disaster Loans, and other programs through the Small Business Administration. We've been putting helpful resources up on our website for quick reference by our business community. The U.S. Chamber has provided many tools and guides that several local businesses have reviewed and said that these are some of the best documents out there. We've also gathered resources from local, state, and federal agencies on our COVID-19 webpage. Please continue to tune into that page as we add more resources to the site going forward. As Sabrina mentioned in her comments, the Chamber is eager to participate in the economic recovery process. We will be listening in on the SNSB Economic Development Commission meeting later today. We've had talks with FEDC and Explore Fairbanks as we all start to coalesce and identify our organizational strengths that we bring to the table and that we can leverage to get Fairbanks back to business and on a path toward recovery. If you have feedback about what economic recovery means to you, to your business, your job, please be sure to share your ideas with me. You can call or email me anytime, and you can find my contact information on our website. My final announcement is more of a question for our members. Is your business getting creative with the services that you provide? Are you partnering with other member businesses to provide additional support to community or local organizations? Are you taking some of your events virtual? We want to know what you're doing differently in these times, and we'd love to help you share your news through our Members on the Move section of our website and our weekly newsletters. Please email Brenna information so that we can help you share the word. You can find all of this information and more on our website at fairbankschamber.org. Thank you so much. Back to you, Sabrina.
Great, thanks, Marissa. Now for our main presentation today. The Fairbanks Chamber commits to develop, maintain, and support cooperative and beneficial partnerships between the military and interior Alaska businesses that stimulate regional economic growth, promote the capabilities and sustainability of our interior military installations, and support our servicemen and women, their families, and their role in defending our nation's interests. We are so happy to have Colonel Christopher Ruga here to share the state of the Garrison with us today. Colonel Christopher J. Ruga comes to U.S. Army Garrison, Alaska from the U.S. Naval War College in Newport, Rhode Island. Originally from Rolla, Missouri, he received his commission through the Reserve Officer Training Corps at Murray State University in 1997. He is a graduate of the Field Artillery Officer Base Course, the Adjutant General Captain's Career Course, the Command and General Staff College, and the U.S. Naval War College. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Political Science from Murray State University, a Master of Arts in Human Resource Management from Webster University, and a Master of Arts in National Security and Strategic Studies from the U.S. Naval War College. We're honored to have Colonel Ruga here, who has completed 2 combat deployments, both to Afghanistan, in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. His duty stations include Fort Riley, Kansas, Fort Drum, New York, Fort Knox, Kentucky, Stuttgart, Germany, and now Fort Wainwright, Alaska. Colonel Ruga and his wife, Kimberly, have 1 child. Colonel, welcome, and thank you so sincerely for your service and sacrifice to our community and our nation. I look forward to your presentation today.
Okay. Thank you, Sabrina. Appreciate it. So welcome, everybody. So my intent today is just kind of to give an overview of what's going on with the U.S. Army Garrison, Alaska. And for those of you who are very familiar with U.S. Army Garrison, Alaska and Fort Wainwright, some of this may be known to you, but my assumption going in is that not everybody's tracking what we do on this installation and within the garrison. So I'll do a little bit of overview, and then hopefully I've got slides that, because you can't have any military brief without slides, kind of facilitate my brief, but then ultimately hopefully queue up some questions as we get toward the end of the brief that I can really answer what's on everybody's mind. So with that, go to the next slide. So what is U.S. Army Garrison, Alaska? So U.S. Army Garrison, Alaska essentially is the installation service provider that services Fort Wainwright and Fort Greely. And we also have some smaller entities, Seward Military Reservation, and we have a few members of our team that actually work down at J-Bear. And so we provide those installation services. But for the purposes of this brief, I'm going to focus primarily on Fort Wainwright, since we are talking with the Fairbanks Chamber of Commerce. So what we do, we facilitate the readiness of our Army forces. And for Fort Wainwright, that in particular ends up being the 125 Striker Brigade, 125 Attack and Reconnaissance Aviation Battalion, the 152 General Support Aviation Battalion, and 17th Combat Service Support Battalion, about half of it here and half of it down in J-Bear, as well as the services provided by Bassett Army Community Hospital. And so we support all those units, making sure that they're able to do the mission that they're assigned by the Army to do. And then we provide the installation services also to the folks that live and work here on the installation. So those are our Arctic warriors, our soldiers, our families, civilians, and the greater community, which here in the interior includes a very large number of veterans and retirees. Our vision, and I focus on one key word in our vision, and that's thrive. We really focus on the fact that when you come to Fort Wainwright and you come to Alaska, the opportunities that are presented here are different than anywhere else in the military. And we really try to impress on our soldiers and family members that this is an opportunity like no other, and be able to leave their time in Alaska saying with their "when I was in Alaska" stories, and be able to make their lives richer in the process. And then our core values, these are the core values of not only our workforce, but they're the core values of the Army. And the reason we put them here and we talk about them, it's unique with our workforce, that we share the values from our workforce and our customers, and that can't necessarily be said throughout the throughout the world, throughout the economy, and out in commerce, where you may have some values that differ and in times may be diametrically opposed. It's a huge benefit for us. So let's go to the next slide. So really divide what we try and do here on Fort Wainwright into 4 key lines of effort. And I'll talk a little bit more in detail on these as we get into the brief. But the first one is really, how do we care for the soldiers, families, civilians, and retirees that we serve in U.S. Army Garrison, Alaska. Establishing a good footing for ensuring readiness for our units. Developing our military and civilian leaders and for us in particular, that's within the garrison, and at a broader level, U.S. Army Alaska works at that in particular at the broader level for our supported units. And then strengthening teamwork through or strengthening the team through trust and teamwork. And a lot of this is where it comes into our relationships with the community, which part of it is relationships like Chamber of Commerce we're talking now, and as well as the numerous other events that we participate in on behalf of the Army with the local community. And I'll talk a little more about those in a little bit. Next slide. So our environment. So there's kind of two halves of this slide. First is I'll talk on the upper left side. It's who we serve. We serve roughly 20,000 soldiers, family members, civilians, retirees in our local community. And the one thing that I often point out, or regularly point out to soldiers and civilians at our newcomers orientations, is the focusing on that number of retirees in the local community. So see huge number, huge percentage, and as well, veterans. In addition to that, the percentage of veterans, for those of you who are not aware, is somewhere between 12 and 13% in Alaska, and Fairbanks and the interior being some of the highest amongst the population in Alaska. And what I impress upon the soldiers as they're coming in is that what this means is, if you take that number, is roughly 10%, give or take, of when you put veterans in there, of the overall population of the interior Fairbanks area, take that to once removed. So mom, dad, brother, sister, children, and you're probably pushing easily upwards in the 40% range of the population in the interior that is either served or has walked in the shoes of a family member of someone who served. And that is a unique thing for us in the interior that does not happen in the lower 48, where the average veterans rate is somewhere in the 6% range. And it's just significant and a great environment for us to serve in here. We do have a lot of military housing. We have about half of our population lives on the installation, and those 96% utilization rates of our homes and our barracks is that, and then we will. And this with one brigade deployed, 125 Striker, about half of that brigade is deployed right now. When they come back, we're typically bumping around 100% of our utilized space. And then, so that means we've got a large percentage of our population that is off post within the community, renting and buying homes and participating in the real estate market, which is hugely supportive of our force. And we appreciate that. Over on the right is kind of some of the economic impacts that we have from the installation on the local community. So roughly calculated, about 28% of the local economy is generated from the base. And that includes the salaries, about $554 million of the folks that live and work here. As well as all of the various construction projects and training that goes on here. So in FY20, and we're about halfway through that, we've got about $185 million in construction-related projects that we're doing on the installation. Some of these are sustainment, refurbishing existing facilities, and minor scale, and some of them are pretty significant. So we got a couple on there that are barracks renovations for a pair of barracks at $87 million. And I'll talk a little more about this when we talk about quality of life in a little bit. But these are things that do two things. One, they enhance the quality of life for our soldiers, and we continue to improve on that, bringing some of our older facilities up into a more modern conditions, but they also have that secondary effect of returning money into the economy. And so we've got the FY20 numbers here going in as we look forward into FY21 and FY22. There are a fair number of military construction projects I think we're going to have on the horizon. We've already been confirmed for a new child development center in FY22, so probably somewhere around $55 million in expenditures there for that construction project. And we're very hopeful. We've got some additional barracks and some maintenance facilities on the horizon just behind that. So, next slide. So training and employment capabilities. I put this slide in here just to highlight that we're more than just the installation, the cantonment area of Fort Wainwright that you might be familiar with if you were to drive onto post. The land that we manage is about 1.6 million acres. It includes the Tananoff Flats, Yukon, and Donnelly training areas down near Fort Greely, which are shown here on this map. In addition to all those training resources, which are phenomenal, world-class, some of it's the largest ground maneuver area in the Army and in the Department of Defense. We also serve as a strategic platform, and I mentioned our units that we support. And so 125, for example, Striker Brigade, about half of that unit's deployed now, and we deployed them all out of Fort Wainwright and the Fairbanks airport. We have the ability to bring in every aircraft in the Air Force's inventory in here, to include C-5s, which came in and took some of the equipment heading to Iraq with 125 out this summer, which is hugely significant. And our airfield can do just about anything we need it to do. So the capabilities that we have on this installation from a strategic platform for the nation are incredible. Next slide. So the kind of elephant in the room right now, and I will address a little bit of that and then move on to kind of quality of life, because really what I would like to discuss holistically is you know, beyond COVID, because we will get through this, but it is not insignificant what the installation and the community are dealing with right now. So I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing in response to COVID. The next slide. So our priorities, as always, are our soldiers' families and civilian population, and then secondarily, at least at this exact moment, ensuring the readiness. And so these two things, you have to preserve the safety of our families, soldiers' families, and civilians in order to ensure readiness. And so there's kind of that symbiotic relationship between those two. What we've done and what we're doing, we are taking all of our guidance from the Department of Defense and the Army and U.S. Army Alaska in response to social distancing and other COVID-related requirements. We've closed a great number of our facilities and changed and restructured a lot of our services. A significant portion of our workforce is working from home and doing telework. And these are all things that we continue to assess on a day-to-day basis. Essentially, we're mission essential personnel, and what that means is the personnel that are required to do whatever the mission is on a daily basis. And so I think as the Army leadership has said, the Army can't take a day off because the nation expects us to be ready. While the first responders in the community are our medical personnel, our fire, our police, from a national strategic perspective, the Army continues to be the nation's first responders, and we have to be ready. With this, we continue to work with the community. Our emergency managers, both from the Garrison and from Bassett Urban Community Hospital, participate as liaison officers to the Unified Command and participate in those daily meetings and coordination. And then along with ILSON, I participate in a number of other venues with community leaders to make sure that we are synced, or as synced as we possibly can be across the different communities. So got General Order Number 1 on this slide. And essentially what this is, Major General Andresiak, who's the commander of U.S. Army Alaska, has put in place a order that essentially puts the power of the Uniform Code of Military Justice behind social distancing requirements. And so unlike some sectors of the civilian community where it is potentially difficult for civilian authorities to enforce social distancing and some of the requirements associated that we've put in place associated with COVID, one of the beauties of the military is we do have some of those abilities to put a little bit of teeth behind doing what we're supposed to be doing. And so to that effect, things like ensuring that quarantines, when soldiers are put into quarantine, that they actually do that, and that there are teeth behind potentially UCMJ punishment associated with breaking quarantines, failure to social distance, failure to wear cloth face coverings in community areas where greater than 6 feet of social distancing cannot be maintained. All of these things are specified in this General Order Number 1 on what soldiers cannot do. And then the final thing is developing innovative training options. And I think this is where we're really starting to focus on, probably along with the rest of the nation. During the first couple of weeks, we were kind of in reaction and regular, reassessment mode. And we continue to reassess everything that we do here on the installation on a daily basis. But at this point, rather than kind of in the rollback piece of things on assessing, we're in the process of how do we roll into and lean forward into getting our services redeployed in a socially distanced fashion. And so just like we're conducting this chamber meeting in a virtual environment, many of our services that we provide to our soldiers and family members are going back in and identifying different virtual environments and different ways that we can provide these same things in a socially distanced world. Next slide. All right, future strategy. Go one more slide, please. So from the Garrison perspective, we identified what we wanted to do in 2020 or FY20 into 8 different areas. And I'll focus on a couple of these. A couple of these are kind of more internal, but there's been a lot of quality of life discussion over the last year for Fort Wainwright. And legitimately, there's been, we've probably had a little bit of lack of reinvestment in infrastructure here at Fort Wainwright over the last several decades. And we do have, unlike, unlike other installations, but one of the unique things about being stationed at Fort Wainwright is that it is obviously a long way from home for a lot of folks. And we do have probably about 1/3 of our population, as I do my anecdotal, hey, raise your hand, who wanted to come to Alaska, who was like, yeah, I'll go to Alaska, or, oh, heck no, I don't want to go to Alaska. We got about 1/3 mix every time I do a newcomers brief. And so one of the things we're talking is for those folks that are in that 3rd category, being able to communicate that, hey, there's a lot of phenomenal stuff here. And if you didn't want to come to Alaska, which we did, but I recognize some folks love Florida and love Texas and love hot places. And I can understand why this might not be the place for them, just for the same reason that those places may not be the same places Alaskans would like to spend tons and tons of time. But we do try to message that quality of life. And so it's both what we're doing on the installation, the changes that we're making, and I'll discuss in detail in a couple slides, as well as what the local community brings to the time period where our soldiers and family members are here. And as I mentioned earlier, this is one of those things where when you leave Alaska, whether it's a 2 or 3 or 4 year term here, that you go with those when I was in Alaska stories that make it phenomenal. Talk to infrastructure improvements. I'll talk a little more detail of those in a moment. Promoting a healthy community. A lot of this focuses on providing better food options in our DFACs and our dining facilities, and our improving our fitness facilities. Winter maintenance facilities. We've got a lot of vehicles here, and they sit outside in motor pools and are cold soaked all winter. It makes it very difficult to do maintenance on those and keep the readiness levels high. And so that was one of the things we heard from our soldiers here in last year when we did a assessment of what would improve the quality of life. And a lot of the soldiers said, hey, you know what would improve the quality of life is for us to have a better access to do our mission, which means actually being able to work on our vehicles in a more ready fashion. So right now we would have to bring a striker in from the motor pool into the building, let it warm up for a day or 2, and before we really start turning wrenches on it. What we're working to do is have these winter maintenance facilities where we can put 20+ vehicles inside at a time and have them consistently warm and consistently able to be worked on and maintained, and then maintained at a higher level of readiness for the nation's needs. Advancing our environmental readiness is something we continuously work on, adhering to regulations, long-term archaeological strategies, working through environmental impact statements for the various projects that we would have across the installation. We've got a couple, 6 and 7 really are our developmental goals for our employees, working on some developmental assignments program and professional development program locally. And then 8 is kind of part and parcel of what we're doing right now, is continue to enrich our community ties. I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. Go to the next slide. So I'm not sure how well this slide shows up on folks' screens, but I've got 8 little clouds with different quality of life initiatives circling the center there. And I'll highlight a little bit on each of these. And if you've got questions in any more detail, I'd be happy to answer those as we go a little further in. So ways in which we're addressing quality of life for our soldiers and families. starting out with reception of our soldiers and families as they come in, improve newcomers reception. And one of the really exciting things that we're doing with this is teaming up with Explore Fairbanks to do community orientation tours. And while we're temporarily on hold with the inability to pack onto buses to do tours, we did a couple of these early in March, and then once we get to the point where we're able to do this again, and we may figure out a way to do a socially distanced orientation tour of Fairbanks in the near future. This is really something that our soldiers have, at least the first couple iterations, have said is really appreciated. So we take the soldiers around to various points, Morris Thompson Center, show them where FMH is, make sure they know where UAF is, spend a little bit of time at the Museum of the North, Fairgrounds, Carlson Center, Big Dipper, all of those places where stuff happens in the community in the Fairbanks area that you actually, if you just come in and your orientation to the installation is maybe getting as far as Fred Meyer at Walmart and Lowe's, you may miss. We're really trying from the get-go to take our families out into the community and make sure they understand all the things that the community has to offer. Number 2 on barracks programs there, really making a lot of improvements in the barracks. So our barracks have never had blackout shades in them, and that was one of the things that came up in about this time last year in talking with soldiers, and the sleep issues that go along with that. And so by next month, we will have blackout shades in all of our occupied barracks rooms and allow our soldiers a little bit better ability to sleep and not deal with the 24-hour sunlight this summer. And then in the winter, on the converse side of that, we've got a whole bunch of happy lights that we've got that have the ability for our soldiers and families to check those out on a long-term basis to address seasonal affective disorder. Transportation. So our installation, we have barracks that are on the opposite side of the airfield from where our dining facilities are, and so we started a installation shuttle, which surprisingly was not here previously. And then we're also partnering with ASYMCA to develop some additional off-post transportation options. And this is one of those things that's temporarily on hold because of COVID, but as soon as we get back into a little bit more permissive environment, we will readdress those. Dining facilities, a whole lot of aesthetics improvements, as well as higher quality food in our dining facilities. Recreation facilities, this is one of those ones where quality of life really, people think quality of life when you think morale, welfare, and recreation. And so over probably the next 12 to 18 months, we will start seeing significant improvements in some of our facilities. We're going to do a fair number of renovations, which we're just waiting to finalize some information. We're getting a new ski lodge this summer. We just started demolition in this past week. Trying to ensure that we've got notification out around post with some digital signage. So in addition to social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram type of things, how do we display what's going on the installation so that as soldiers are out and about in their daily life, we can really kind of put it right in front of their face, and so they know the different things that are going on. So we're putting some digital signage in at a great number of community locations and within the barracks and the dining facilities. And so hopefully we'll make it much more accessible for soldiers to find out what's going on the installation. Move over to the infrastructure upgrades. We've got, I mentioned earlier, a child development center, the new one that will be constructed beginning in FY22. We're also doing a fair number of upgrades to some existing facilities. So if you're familiar with historic hangar number 1 on Ladd Army Airfield, the interior of that, not touching any of the historic pieces, but the interior of that will be converted over the next couple months to a Army PT test facility for the Army Combat Fitness Test. So we'll have a series of pull-up bars. There'll be a short indoor track, but an indoor track that will at least allow a minimum of testing during the winter months when here in Alaska we've got some issues getting out on icy snow in order to complete timed events for physical fitness tests. And then as we get in, as mentioned earlier, we get into the next couple of fiscal years, truly anticipate that we will have a fair number of multi-million-dollar projects that come in the forms of maintenance facilities, new motor pools, and new barracks. Readiness, we've converted one of our gyms to 24-hour access, and right now it's something that has a employee that's there 24 hours, but in the next few months it'll go to a camera CCTV monitored facility similar to 24-hour fitness type of facility. And the hope and intent is to expand that to at least one more of our gyms. We've got about $910,000 in new gym equipment. About 90% of it has come in and has been installed already. And we'll continue improvements in some of our other facilities. Messaging. Really part of that is communication and doing things like we're doing right now, but then direct communication with our soldiers and families. General Andresiak has been conducting monthly town halls, just focused strictly on quality of life. We've got a new digital app that the Installation Management Command is piloting, and we're one of 10 pilot locations across the Army that's working on that. And so the intent with that is yet another point where soldiers and family members can find out what's going on the installation with ease, and then figure out how to get there, what they need to do to participate in a particular event and or service that the installation maybe provides, whether it's medical services or training. So a lot of stuff going on. I'll be happy to answer any questions regarding quality of life as we go through. Current and future infrastructure projects. Let's go to the next slide. So I talked a little bit about this, and so this slide kind of shows 6 areas of our current infrastructure where we're looking to improve. And I've got a 7th thing that is not on there, and that's our power plant. We're not necessarily looking to improve, but what we're looking at right now is we're going through the environmental impact statement process to determine what our long-term sustainable heat and power needs are. And so we're in about a little over a quarter of the way into a 2-year process there. Environmental impact statement will be released later this spring, early summer. For additional dialogue in the community on what our heat and power generation will look like deep into the future. Currently, we've got about a 70-year-old power plant. It's just kind of prudent for us to address now what our requirements are going to be in the future. In addition to that, on the infrastructure side of things, I mentioned maintenance facilities and barracks earlier. We're looking right now at converting or improving our airfield capability to year-round capability. Right now, our helicopters can fly year-round, no issues. Some military fixed-wing aircraft can come in no issues with some snow, but we do have some limitations as opposed to other facilities. And so, to again improve the readiness, because that's what we do, we improve the readiness of our installation at any point we can in the units. We're looking to improve the year-round capability. Ideally, the lower left, we'd like a field house to be able to have and it says 110-meter track. That's what our current track is. So that's a lot of little laps to get to a 2-mile run, kind of get dizzy there. And it's pretty narrow, as you can see. In the long term, ultimately get to where we have a 200-meter facility so that in the dead of winter, we can still conduct good cardiovascular running events within on Fort Wainwright. And then the bottom 2, we're consistently looking at ways to improve our access points, to improve the security of the installation, and then our company operating facilities, which is where our company commanders and first sergeants coordinate the day-to-day movement and operations of their companies. Some of them we have in pretty non-standard facilities that we've updated and changed over the years, and this picture shows some temporary buildings. As we've expanded and contracted in the number of units here, we've been limited on the amount of infrastructure we have. And so moving toward a little bit better, more standard environments for all of our companies. All right, next slide. Engaging the community. So we have about 65 memorandums of agreement with the local community, as well as and to include memorandums of understanding and mutual aid agreements. These are huge to what we do within the installation. There's very few things that we don't reach out and touch the installation or the local community in one shape, form, or other for much of what we do, whether it's relying on the local governments, or we rely on contractors to do many of the services. Those all come from the local community, and our agreements are instrumental in those. So I got a few that are highlighted on here that we've worked with the local community on recently. Our computer-aided dispatch that recently went online here provides some redundancy capabilities for Fairbanks. We have some mutual benefits on doing railroad crossing maintenance that we don't have to do that ourselves, and we work with Alaska Railroad to do those for us, and we provide compensation. And then I mentioned the new soldier orientation down at the bottom, that we continue to work on improving the experience of our soldiers as they arrive and figure out what's what with Fairbanks and interior Alaska. Next slide. Collaborative environmental efforts. So you saw this our previous slide that we've got a huge amount of training land, which means there's a huge amount of hunting, in particular moose area, that is important to the local community. And so we work to open our training lands up to the local community whenever we possibly can, as long as it doesn't interfere with our training mission that our units are doing. And believe it or not, we actually try and work around those key hunting seasons whenever possible. Not always possible, but we truly do our best to do that. Open our areas up for recreation, firewood opportunities. We've got right here on the local area, local cantonment area, we've got opportunities right now. If you want to stock up for firewood for the next season, we've got opportunities for folks to come in and cut wood and take it off the installation. Wildfire management. So we've got the Alaska Fire Service headquarters located just down the street from us on Fort Wainwright, and we do a lot of collaboration with them. During the height of the fire season, I think we'll probably run about 300 or 400 firefighters through here. At least that's what we did last summer. Smoke jumpers are here already training and getting ready for the summer fire season. And we honestly work very, very closely with Bureau of Land Management, Alaska Fire Service, to ensure that we're being good stewards of our area, our training lands, and not doing additional unnecessary fire risk to the community. Environmental management partnerships. A lot of these are, like I mentioned, the BLM, fire mitigation, but we've also got agreements with UAF for archaeological repository for anything that we find on the installation. We've got a huge number of archaeological sites across our training lands, and some of those go back into prehistoric times. Some of them are more recent in the settlement of Alaska timeframes. Got some old dugouts and cabins and stuff that archaeologists will go out and survey and maintain and ensure that we protect. And so all of these things are really huge for us, and be able to maintain those partnerships with both UAF and other universities as we work through those. And then compatible use buffer. So this is something that kind of flies under the radar quite often, but we actually work to make sure that we don't have conflict with the use of our neighbors. And so part of that is from an airfield perspective, a training perspective, a net explosive weight perspective from our ammunition supply or holding areas, that we have plenty of standoff distance for doing what we need to do on the installation and then the local community. So when opportunities present themselves, we do look at expanding the property around Fort Wainwright to allow that buffer between civilian activity and what's going on the installation. And so that's just something we continuously reassess and acquire different lands. I think we've pulled about 624 acres of land around Fort Wainwright. The government's purchased and pulled back into that buffer zone in recent years. Next slide. And so I think on summary on that the previous slide, we can't do this without the Fairbanks community, and we work really hard to be good partners. And then I'll kind of close the last slide just showing, hey, there's a lot going on here in Fort Wainwright. We're pretty stinking active beyond our training areas and the training events for our units. There's a lot that happens, and to put it in some common terms of bowling games played and diapers changed, this kind of shows what goes on the installation on a daily basis. So I will turn it over there to some questions, and happy to answer.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Colonel, for that presentation. We'll go ahead now and take time for questions. So please type your question into the comment stream online, and then Janelle, I'll ask that you manage those questions. Colonel, I'd like to start, if you don't mind. Boy, I loved hearing about all the plans for improved wellness and recreation facilities. Our family frequents Birch Hill Ski Area, and probably more so the hockey rinks and even sometimes the laser tag center. I'm assuming that after we get through the COVID cautions, public access will remain the same for all of those facilities and even the newer ones?
Yeah, so after we get through this, actually hopefully expand a little bit. Just prior to COVID, we were actually looking at opening the aperture to our community partners for some of those recreation type facilities. So our first priority is to ensure that our soldiers and our families have unfettered access to our morale and recreation facilities. But a lot of our facilities are robust enough that they allow that as well as our community to come in and partner, whether it be the ski hill or the golf course, hockey rink, laser tag. And so I think as we get past COVID, we will actually look at expanding that access a little bit.
Oh, that sounds great. Go ahead, Janelle.
Okay, so we did have one comment so far and one question that came in online. So the comment was just someone saying that they've had very positive experiences renting their residential properties to service members. So a little shout out to the service members as good renters. And then the question, which I'm going to do my best to interpret the acronyms. I know the military folks are very familiar with some of these, so I'm going to do my best. Historically, the COLA, which I believe is cost of living adjustment, for Joint Base Almendorf, Richardson, and Anchorage has been greater than for troops stationed in the Fairbanks area. What is the current status of COLA rates for Fairbanks?
So the COLA rates, so actually they adjust on a regular basis, and it's based on surveys. We just completed a COLA survey here about a month and a half ago, which is entails soldiers going out and getting the actual price on different products in the Fairbanks area, whether it be the cost of cable and internet or the cost of a gallon of milk. And so those COLA rates go up and down based on the cost of the local community. And so, right now, I think it's been pretty significant for the last couple of years. I know our housing allowance just recently dropped a little bit, which is a separate process. COLA has been pretty significant over the last couple of years. I haven't seen people fussing about low COLA. I think we're getting plenty to offset the cost of living in Alaska compared to what folks in lower 48 have.
Okay, thank you. Another question, well, so there is another comment actually. So someone asked us to pass along a big thank you to the soldiers and their families at Fort Wainwright for their selfless service and sacrifices that they make daily. So please pass that along from us. One question, which I know that we've heard quite a few rumors and different people saying different things about access to the base or to post at this point based on the COVID-19 situation, things changing so quickly. So someone did ask specifically about the commissary access, but I wonder if you could just kind of make a couple general statements about right now, are there restrictions on access to different aspects?
Yeah, so right now we do have the installation access restricted to folks who have a bona fide need to be on the installation, and that is our soldiers, family members, retirees, essential contractors. So if you have access to the commissary due to service-related privileges, you have access to the installation. There are no impediments to that currently, and no intention to change that for our retirees or disabled veterans that have those accesses. If you are just somebody who's wanting to come on the installation to go to Burger King, for example, right now is probably not the good time to do that, and we would ask that you come back at a later date.
Makes sense. So one thing, you did talk quite a bit about the quality of life improvements that are being made. And so there was one question that came in on the chat about soldier suicides. And I know that from our military affairs committee, hearing about, what's going on post, we've heard a lot about how those quality of life improvements are, to address some of the concerns about that. So do you want to make any kind of summary statement about just kind of how those are connected?
Sure. So I think the way they're connected is if soldiers and family members are comfortable, feel less isolated where they're at, then the suicide risk decreases. And I think that's the general thought process. And so some of these things that we're looking at doing are related to minimizing the isolation, and admittedly, social distancing under COVID puts additional challenges in that. But making sure that we have those community centers and the ability to reach out and have soldiers have access to one another, be it going to the dining facility because it's an improved environment and better food, that soldiers actually want to go into the dining facility and use that, and will spend time there talking and interacting with each other and establishing those relationships. When they are in the barracks, having better barracks experiences where they feel less isolated, having better internet and things like that associated, better sleeping capabilities, so they're not sleep deprived with so the blackout curtains there. So almost all, in fact, every one of our quality of life improvements can be tied back to one way, shape, or form improving that aspect of military life in Alaska.
Great. I think the last question I see so far is, so there's been talk of incentives to connect military family members to the job needs in the community. So post-COVID, is there any information you can share about what that might look like?
Incentives to connect to the job needs in the community. I can't speak on that one specifically. I will say that they're starting with soldiers who are coming up this year. There is a financial assignment incentive pay that soldiers will get. Really, the intent of that is to offset the cost of winterizing your vehicle, snow tires, buying Arctic gear for your families and stuff like that. Those startup costs that military families everywhere else in the world do not have. That has started this year. And yeah, I'd be happy to explore a little bit more deeply in the question as far as incentives to connect families to opportunities in the community, but that's not something I'm prepared to talk off the top of my head.
Great, thank you. That's all the questions that we have from online.
Okay, great. Thanks, Janelle. And thank you, Colonel. It's so good to see you. I really appreciate your time today and all of the information you shared with us. Friendly reminder, it's Takeout Tuesday. So Chamber members, show your support for local businesses by ordering takeout or delivery for dinner tonight. Or we might suggest donating what you might have spent today on lunch at a real Chamber GML, or to purchase 50/50 tickets, donate that to a nonprofit that's providing critical and basic needs during these challenging times. We certainly appreciate your continued participation each week through these virtually live GML luncheons, and we look forward to next week. We'll have Colonel Bishop, commander of the 354th Fighter Wing, and he'll present the state of Eielson Air Force Base. Please stay tuned to our website and twice weekly e-newsletter, The Scoop, for information on our luncheons, our advocacy efforts, and event updates. And that's all we have today, Fairbanks Chamber. Be well.